Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. Who is here for the first day? Nobody. Oh, no. A couple of people. So you know me from yesterday. Okay. Good. We don't have a lot of time, so we are gonna go through this quite quickly. I am going to show you a little bit about the process of making this short. Who didn't see this short before? Okay. Did you like it? Yeah? Okay. We're going to talk about the process a little bit, the design, the animation, the effects, and if we have time in the end, maybe we have a look even at a production file just to see how it's done. So, as you know, I am Francesco. I work at the Blender Institute in Amsterdam. Beautiful, sunny, wonderful place. And at the Blender Institute, we make short films, and you might have seen some of them, like Big Bug Bunny or Sintel or Elephant's Dream. They are all done with Blender and open source technologies, and they are shared as open content, which means everyone can see, everyone can access the source files of the films to see how they were made. And this is a great learning resource, and making these films, it's a great way to push the development of the software forward. And everything we do, we release and we share with the community, because that helps to spread the knowledge, and it helps to make Blender a better program for everyone. And that's the ultimate goal of the studio, and that's something that makes Blender Institute quite unique in this regard. Since a couple of years, we are running with a new business model, and it's called the Blender Cloud, and it's a subscription-based system that allows people to support us and to support the development of Blender, support the production of more open content by being subscribed to an online platform where all the content can be accessed at all times, everything that was made in the past and everything that is being made right now. and that gives us the continuity, and it allows us to have people in the studio permanently, because before it was not really possible. And we're really happy with how it's working so far. We want to grow, we want to push it more, but of course it takes time. And Cosmos Laundromat, which I've shown yesterday, was the first project that we did there, right after we did Glass Half, an 2D style animated short. And then after that, towards Christmas last year, we did Caminandes 3. So there are 2 more Caminandes before this one. If you like this and you don't know about the others, you should check them out online. And let's dive into it. So this is part of the team that did Caminandes. If you remember, yesterday I put a picture of the Cosmos Laundromat team, and that was twice, almost 3 times the size. In this picture we are missing Juan Pablo Bosa, he's the rigger, the main rigger, and Mattias Mendiola, story artist and storyboard artist. But that was it. And actually this guy here, he didn't do anything, was just sitting around. And this one is Ton, you probably know him. And this is Pablo, he's the director, Andy, art director and environment artist, Kelty and Sarah, they were both animating. So we had a crew of 2 animators and 2 lighting artists and rendering artists to get the thing done, because also Ton, I mean, he's not sitting around, but he's not working with Blender either. So these guys plus 2 more did the film. And we did it in 2 months. So it was a really tight schedule, okay? 2 months of production. We had around a month of pre-production. And that's actually what I'm going to start with, the story development. So how do you make a funny, entertaining 2-minute short film? You know, for us it's very inspiring to look, for example, at the Pixar shorts. They usually last 5, 8 minutes. They are hilarious, they're great, and they have top visual quality. How do you do that? Well, we don't have the same budget, we don't have the same people, maybe we don't even have the same talent, but we try. And one of the most important parts when we do this process is to start with the story development. So there is no technology, there is almost no characters, there is no design involved. It's just thinking about how to make our story flow, how to work with the characters that we have. But at the beginning it's really open. We don't even know who the characters are, we don't even know how many there are, and so on. In our case, we knew we had Koro, the guanaco, the llama, and we wanted him to have an adventure, so like in the other stories. But we didn't know what was going to happen. So we tried a number of variations. So in this case, you just sit around and talk and chat, walk on the streets and discuss very freely on what could be a good idea, and then come up with a few pitches, and then we get together in the studio and talk about them. So what about Koro meeting a penguin? And then they hang out. Or what about Koro doing something else? So in the end, we kind of liked the idea of having a Koro with a penguin body, and that was a good step. But then how would they play together? Would they be friends? Would they be I'm going to show you now a quad split. So it's like a view of the short divided in 4 pictures, and it shows different stages of the development of the film. So the final picture, and some animation, some animatic, and some early storyboards. And at the very beginning you will see that the penguin, which is called Oti, he was just gonna appear in front of Koro. Koro was just going on about his business, and then he would stumble upon this little penguin that would think it's his mother, because he was just hatching out of an egg, and then Koro was happening to pass there, and then they were finding each other. And then he doesn't want to let him go, so Koro walks around, and this guy's following him, and he's like, and he's imitating him, so he's walking on 4 legs. And Koro has to take care of him. I'm telling you all this because afterwards there are some pictures that I want to show you that are still from that story. But then in the end we didn't go for that. We went for what you've seen. So let's see. As you can see, we have a final layout and storymatic. So it's like a very rough mix of storyboard. So you see here there are some drawings made with grease pencil, and this is done directly in Blender. So Koro was still reaching for this berry. This is already kind of later. So as you can see, he goes for the berry, but the timing is very different. So in this case, we are already with the train, and here is still going there. And here there is a drawing of some of the dangers that Koro would have to go through in order to protect Oti from being crushed or to be killed by anything. And as you can see here, is really about Koro trying to protect the penguin with a helmet, and they go into a bunch of explosive, or here there is a giant snowball, and here below you really see the movie looking more, it looks quite different. And as you can see, there is something really important here, that is, well, in this picture you see they are together, there is a sunset scene, and they cuddle, and he's like, Koro is all broken, and the penguin is super cute, and they hug, and they live happily ever after. Well, afterwards there was something else, but in this case instead we have them fighting. And then you see there is this moment where Oti finds his parents, and there is this separation going on, which is pretty much the same here, but in this case we decided to really push for a rivalry and fight, and in this other case well, you see he's heartbroken anyway. In this case it was more like they were bonding together, and then in the end they were being separated, and then as you can see it all goes together in the same way. So they celebrate and they have this cozy moment all together. So during the development, like this is quite late in the development stage, like there are many other reels where things were going different. We had this moment where we went like, okay, shall they fight or shall they be friends? And to make it much more interesting, we went to make them fight, because that's what makes it funny, how they look at each other and the squeezing of the berry in the face, and you know, the penguin is so little but is so mean that it works. So that is an example. You see, this is some material from when Koro was actually looking after Oti. So like they go in a cart, and then you've seen we kept the cart, but they're doing something else. There was a giant avalanche, and they were being crushed by it, and then they were sliding on a piece of ice, and then he was falling down in a crack with water, or they ended up in a minefield and things like that. So we really wanted to get Koro broken. And as you've seen, we were lucky enough to to be able to dedicate some time to do the final character polish, because animation was a bit delayed. So the effects and lighting department had extra time to go in the scenes and polish them. So you've seen that Koro during the film gets more and more damaged. He gets bruises, he gets like splinters of wood, and you see the character changing from shot to shot, and that is the little bit of quality that you normally don't have, because there is no time for it, but we were lucky to be able to put it in, and I think it helps. This is more shots of the mine. So the mine was an environment we really wanted to explore, and there was a moment where there was some explosive and danger happening there, or this thing we kind of kept with the reaching out for the berry, and also the flying out. And I don't know, this is Koro being like going through some flowers and becoming like a little flower himself. So this process goes on for several weeks for a short this long, and at the same time and right after, we get into design. So how do the characters look like once we know who they are? How the environments look like? In the case of Caminandes, a lot of things were established already, so we know how the visual quality is, or we know at least the visual quality we aim for. We know the style of the characters, how their eyes are, how the world works. So in a sense it was a little bit easier than usual. And these are some sketches, some research sketches from Oti. So these are made by Matthias. He had fun playing with the character and seeing just, you know, different variations, just showing you how Oti could have been. And with the feedback from the director and the feedback from the team, this is all stuff we usually discuss together. We went to towards a more final design. And this thing that you see here is a character sheet. So this is the step that happens after many of those of these guys here do a lot, and then you get down to, okay, this is the character, so now we need to make a character sheet. So if I'm not mistaken, this was made by Sarah, and these are drawings that help, that are the foundation for the modeling of the characters themselves. So you really don't leave any space for doubt, no space for interpretation. This is exactly the proportion, this is exactly the colors, exactly the shapes that we want to be translated in 3D. And as you can see, we have 3 models in this case. There is Oti, there is Theo, he's like the big, like the kind of, originally he was supposed to be the father. Maybe it still is, but it's not so clear anymore. And then this was a more generic penguin, the Pinguino. And yesterday Ines was showing this with in a BlendRig demo. So after having this, we start the modeling process. So we go in and super fast we do all this modeling, and we could stay here for around 5 minutes and watch this whole thing unfold. That's how fast we are. Now this is a time lapse from Sarah, of course, but I just thought I put it in to show a little bit, so we can also skip through it. See, now I'm much more experienced. No, actually not. But yesterday I was able there. It's really like this, there. So the 5-minute video, but you can see the process of a first pass of rough modeling, getting really the basic proportions together, and then moving on to doing maybe some proportional editing, and afterwards redefining the topology, redefining the structure, making everything even for good unwrapping, putting the seams in the right place so that the wings can bend, putting in the eyes. Originally we had this idea of already designing with some edge loops the colors of the character, and that in the end it didn't really work out very well. Then you talk in IRC with somebody. Then we put together the eyes and the eye sockets, and I mean, this is everybody who is familiar with the modeling process knows all this, but I think it's interesting to see how then there is a final pass of editing with sculpting brushes until we get to the final model. This is another example of development. Some of these sketches were made by Pablo. This is an OpenGL render from Blender, but it's been painted over to see the mood, because it's very cheap to just paint with the GIMP, for example, over a OpenGL frame that renders in a second, then making a full render. You know how the shot is going to look like, more or less, and then you can just go in and tweak it. And the same goes for this shot. So this is the mine shot. This was really early on in the process, and we had this idea that there was this light shaft coming in, and he was reaching for this one berry, and Koro was like, oh my god. And then we changed the dynamic. Actually, Koro is like, oh, I want it too. And then we had to put more berries because you actually wouldn't see them, because there was so much going on in the scene, so much visual complexity. So, but in the end, you see the concept is there. Let's talk a bit about animation. Here I brought you a couple of examples just for fun. Is very cool to see how the animation process goes when working on this. This is a very small shot progression that goes from blocking to final of the moment where Koro sees Oti on the train tracks. And it's just to show you how many passes are needed to, even in such a short and simple shot, to make it readable and to make it work. So this is the first blocking. This is already smoothed out, and then is more smooth, and this is more quality, and this is the final render. So in this case we have like 4 passes, And there isn't really much going on, but it's just interesting to see how still you really need. And we had that berry that we really needed to make sure that was visible, because in such a big shot, tiny berry, even if it was red, it was not there, so we had to cheat it and make it bigger and make sure that the movement of Oti works well with the camera movement, and so on. This is more interesting because this has a reference, which is always great to look at. So probably you can guess which shot this is. It's the guy trying to pull the berry. So Sarah, in this case, went in and recorded some reference, because this motion is very peculiar. So you really need something there. And you see, in the end, she added something at the very end, because she thought the animation would improve, like would make him feel more like he was really struggling, he was really in danger. So it's a first blocking pass, a second pass, and then this becomes more polished, and here we are getting towards the end. And again, reference is super important, because otherwise it's hard to achieve believable movement, believable behavior when doing these kind of things, because this is not a motion we see every day, so it's really important to get a realistic idea of how it would play. And as you can see in the background, there is the Christmas train. It's not the black train, because for Christmas we made a teaser trailer of it. It was just the first part of the film until this point, like a little bit further. And there was this Coca-Cola looking train, all red with lights and green on top. And then we removed it. So I think we have a bit of time left. I would like to go in and show you, if we manage, because it's not easy, at a file, a production file. All this is available in the cloud. Hello. Okay. So let's see. I am going to get the file. So first of all, as I was saying, you can get all these files from the cloud. You can go Caminandes, Amigos, and in a lot of things are public for this project. So we have our production files here. We have extras, like this card is the card of the mine scene, and this is a public asset. Is kind of rigged, and it's fun to just go in and play and check it out, check out how we set up the shaders, how we set up the wheel mechanism and things like that. So that's free. So if you go on the cloud, you can just get it. And here we have the SVN repository. This is a 4.7 gigabyte file that contains everything. Like this is our production, like it's an image of our latest checkout of the SVN repository. So if you download this file, you basically get the full short, the files that we used to make it, to render it. So you can go in, open the files, press F12, and they render. And you see exactly the one-on-one directory structure that we used for organizing the assets, for organizing the characters, for organizing the textures, and so on. And in this folder instead, we find the movie shots. The movie shots have been categorized by sequence. So we have 10 sequences, and in each sequence we have a blend file for every shot. So these are BAM-packed files. So what does it mean? Well, it means that we went in the final lighting file and used the BAM asset manager to pack all the assets in an intelligent way next to this file, so that you would be able to just take that file and all its dependencies out of the project and be able to render it. So if you're interested in a specific file, you don't need to get all the 4 GB archive, but you can just go in and get the specific file that you want. And that's very convenient. You can see that the size of the files is much larger, but the advantage is that you don't need everything else. So these are fully standalone files that can be used for rendering the film. So I'm going to show you a file. My Blender is maybe not super up to date, but we will try. So let's see. I am opening. Okay. So just a moment. I'm going to make the interface a bit smaller so you can see something. Great. And this is the chase scene. So this is when they are on the cart. And this is like, again, a final shot. So you can see it takes its time to update. This is how we normally work. So this is the set. This is the full set where the action takes place. You can see there is the final part of the train tracks that was needed because that's where they come from. And then they are moving out. They have we have some environment that has been sculpted. You see here, just with sculpting brushes, and it's all painted from the perspective of the camera. So if you look at it from here, it doesn't look that great. But then when you're in the camera view with the motion blur and the motion, you don't really see it. See, there is an abandoned car. There is just some random material around until they get to this. Until they get to this part where Koro gets the juice squeezed in his eyes. And these are all scenes tied together, so in a separate shot, in a separate scene, we did the fluid sim and then put it together here. This is compositing. This is actually a shader setup for a material. So it's a big shaders going on here, and the render layers, the rendering setup is actually much simpler because when working with cycles, so far we choose an approach that is very compact. In Cosmos we did the same. There is not so much cheating from that point of view because of the way cycles work. So in this case we have just a couple of layers with the characters and the background because we try to work with vector blur and motion blur so that we get affordable render times, because at the time and still now rendering with motion blur, it's in cycles like native motion blur is still quite expensive, especially if you have furry characters. So that is always a big challenge. And another shot that we can quickly look at is the final shot, the dinner. And in that case, you've seen we had a lot of characters there. Like there are a lot of background characters. And working with that level of complexity is still very challenging in Blender. So you have to find a way to do it. And we work with MDD caches. So in this case, you see we have Hjalti animating a penguin cycle, for example, on one penguin. And then Andy baked this cycle into an MDD cache, which is basically a representation of the final result of the deformed mesh for that character. And then this can be used as a modifier by any other object. So this allows us to propagate an animation across several objects, even with an animation offset,
and it's very fast for Blender to render, and it's not animation anymore, it's just deformation instructions. So it makes it possible for us to actually render very big, complicated scenes with Blender. As you can see here, there are all the characters in the background, and this is how the scene looks like. It's very simple. There is the background in the distance, quite low resolution. There is a lighthouse. You can see the Caminandes universe has these very stylized environment elements like this lighthouse, sad lighthouse. And we have our star. And let's see if I can toggle through the layers to see if what we get. Like this is our background, one character, Oti. Usually on the other layers we have the rigs. So in this case the file, well, there is some grease pencil nodes over this, and see view, display, only render. See, in this case we split the rigs and the characters itself, so we can easily toggle them on and off. So you don't want to see the rig, you can just see the characters interacting for a preview or something like that, and then when you're animating you can actually turn them on. And in the other layers we have background characters. So for example, this guy eating, well, not here, here. So this should be playing back quite fast, like it goes at 9 frames per second, which is really fast given the complexity of this scene. So here we have another guy, and here we have some other guys. Actually, those are the rigs, and this is the background environment, and these are the cameras and floating objects, and here is a crowd of penguins in the background hanging out with different animation cycle. So in this case, the frame rate is dropping a little bit, but you can see the background guys. Okay, so that being said, I'd like to thank you very much, and maybe we have a few minutes for questions. Thank you.
Are there any?
Hello. I would like to ask a couple of questions. In the beginning, you were showing the animatic, and how many shots do you have in one Blender file for the animatic? Do you have the whole movie in the same file, or do you cut it in different shots?
Yeah, well, I think I didn't see exactly the process for Matthias because he wasn't in the studio, but I'm pretty sure he worked with scenes, and we did it in the past for Glass Half. Basically, you make a scene where for each shot, and then you put them together with a sequencer. So that's it's a separate. No, but you can work in the same file. No, it's one file. Like it's the edit.blend, and there you can just make 20, 50 scenes, 100 doesn't matter, and then you put them together in the sequence editor as scenes. So in the sequence. Well, let me see. Maybe I have the edit. Maybe he committed it, but I'm not sure. Just a moment.
Let's see how fast I can get this running. If I don't find it, we can look at it later. Let's see. No, okay, I don't have the file because I only could get a few of them. So if I remember correctly, everything was done in one edit file, and then with the video sequencer, it was being put together. And then I can go look for it, and we can look at it together.
something like that. Yeah, maybe 2 months and a half of production. Well, I think you could say that the budget for Caminandes was around maybe 35. Yeah, something like that. Like you can see it like in terms of crowdfunding, like in terms of cloud funded money, we are talking about almost 3 months of production. So the numbers of public, we have almost 2,000 subscribers, so you can do the math for that. Well, no. We did it just with the cloud. Just with the cloud. Of course, it's not full time for everybody. For example, the pre-production part is really dedicated. Just a few people spend time on it because we have to keep. Of course, we cannot just stop everything in the cloud and start making film. And also the development itself, like for these very short productions, the developers that are there, they keep working on Blender normally, and they support us a little bit in the pipeline and to do something. But if a production is so short, there isn't really immediate benefit for Blender. So, well, there is a blog post from. Let's go to the beautiful. Oh no, actually, we can use my computer. I am so afraid of.
If you go on cloud.blender.org, because I don't remember all of them, so I'm going to cheat and I'm going to go to Open Projects and Caminandes, and there is a blog and Blender development. So a lot of improvements in the sequence editor, grading tools, absolute mask animation time, OpenGL sequencer animation speed up because, you know, Sergey makes everything faster, and little utilities mostly. You see, this was very important, use ambient occlusion option per render layer. So this was a tool so that you could choose, for example, Pablo needed to render the mountains in the background to give them a little bit of extra detail, and ambient occlusion helps, but you need to tweak it because if you have a different, like the different scale of a scene has a different results in ambient occlusion, and you wanted to have that only in a specific render layer. That was not possible in Cycles, so Sergey implemented that. And dependency graph, so we did some tests with a new dependency graph. We didn't use it for this project, but it's always good. And OpenGL render faster because we always need to do previews and improvements in the visualization of the camera, delete libraries, and then some very important fixes that, a very important fix from Bastien that Andy was very happy with, which was particle editing tools that was broken since a couple of versions of Blender that wouldn't allow particle editing for making this kind of characters. You would edit the particles in one place and they would appear somewhere else. It was like a disaster, and that was actually fixed in this case. So actually quite a lot, yeah. Yeah, this is the outcome of the film, because if you don't have a bunch of people bashing their head against the screen and be like, please fix this, it takes time. All right. I think we are running out of time, so thank you again. And if you have any question, I'm here all day, so please come by, ask stuff, and I'm super happy to talk to you. Thank you.